And yeah, it's a weird place. And you're an online trainer, and you train people for a living, so you probably see a lot of that. But from your perspective, what is the, and I guess we're going to start off hot, but what is the thing that drives you the most and why? That's every time I talk to somebody about their journey, that's one of the biggest questions I ask them. What's your motivation? Or I guess motivation is kind of crap sometimes. What is your biggest proponent, and what propels you, and why?
Yeah, well, first off, I really like the motivation is crap kind of statement there, because I think that's something that a lot of guys, especially when they first start out training, they're coming in hot, they're watching whoever it is, nowadays it's C-Bum or somebody like that, whether it's him or Rich Piana or Ziz or whatever, big person in the social media, or even before that, like on YouTube. Those kinds of things, yeah, they can give you that motivation, which I feel like is kind of a cheap hit a lot of the time. And so for me, a lot of it was just learning to get past that and realize that you're not always going to feel like training. You're not always going to want to mobilize, stretch. You're not going to want to eat good. You're not going to want to go to bed on time. Like all of those things, the motivation is only there. Like maybe for me, I would say half of the days that I go into the gym, I'm like hyped to train. And then I would say a fourth of the time, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm good. I'm not excited to train, but I'm not like demotivated. And then I would say probably a fourth of the days for myself personally, I don't want to train. Like I feel like garbage, or my head's just not in it. Mm-hmm. But you still got to do it. So I think for me, like a lot of it was just learning, like not only where to find the motivation, but sort of developing the discipline to, even when you don't have the motivation, you still just, you got to go in, you got to get it done.
For sure. And like, nowadays we have technology. Like, I don't know if you wear a Whoop or not, but it's kind of funny, like with the way, and I think Whoop is a good resource, but it's funny because they have their recovery situation on the app, and it's like, hey man, you didn't sleep good. Your diet sucked. We should probably take the day off. And it's like, are we encouraging people to just like rest when things suck? Are we encouraging people to like not do the hard things when they feel like they don't want to?
Sure.
And there's some science behind it. It's, you want to make sure that, I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to overwork myself. I don't want to get sick. I feel like if you're a professional athlete, it's probably a good thing to have that type of advice, maybe coming from AI generated form of exercise analogies. But realistically, I would tell anybody that wants to get started in that realm and wants to get started in working out and bettering themselves. I'm a full advocate for, you will only get better if you go and do things like that when you don't want to. That's the only time you get better. When I'm feeling good and when I'm in the gym and I'm feeling great and I'm working out and I breeze through it and I feel like I didn't even really work that hard, that's where I feel like I'm just in autopilot. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times autopilot's not where I want to be. The fact that you said that 50% of the time you actually feel motivated to work out, that's crazy because I'm not. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm probably a quarter of my workouts. One of my workouts a week, I'm pretty jazzed up to go work out. The rest of them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. Like I don't, and it's not that I don't want to move or exercise, but my body is telling me, hey, you didn't sleep well last night. You had Taco Bell when you shouldn't have eaten Taco Bell. Like, just hang out. Just go rest. And I think rest is important, but that's on rest days. Like, there's rest days for a reason. Like, if I make a commitment to myself to wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever it is, I'm going to do that because I know that 6 months from now, 6 years from now, that's going to pay dividends, and it's going to create a stronghold within my mind, within my body, where if something else comes up that, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, where you don't have a choice if it's going to suck. Because there are things in life that will suck.
Yes.
But you don't have
A
a
lot of
choice
them.
a lot of things. And you don't have a choice. So what's going to happen? Are you going to, hey, I have a level one that passed. I'm just going to sit this one out. I have a test for my master's degree, or I have something that needs to get done where the variables are out of my control and I have to do something about it. So from a perspective of somebody that is in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, trying to, I guess, motivate yourself, if that's why I put air quotes, because a lot of the things that we put our stock in are motivational to a degree. I think motivation is just meant to get us out of our seats. I think it's just meant to get us up, right? Motivation is just to give you that spark. Motivation's not sustainable. It's one of those things where once you get up and once you actually work towards that goal, then it becomes passion, it becomes drive, it becomes purpose. So, but ultimately, TikTok is filled with it. Instagram's filled with it. Facebook is filled with it. It's all these motivational videos, and I appreciate the people that actually have that platform because it's meant to give people that spark and get them out of the chair. But are you going to lean on a TikTok video to sustain you for a workout program that's going to last 5 years to get where you want to be? Or are you going to just have it propel you upward to get out of your seat, get off your ass, and actually go do something? And, when you put your stock in yourself, it makes a lot bigger of a difference. But that does not mean that you're not going to have days where you're like, this sucks. It really sucks. But I had a podcast a couple years ago, or about a year and a half ago, that talked about that. Like, hey, if life really does suck, as we know it does, how are we going to combat that? You either laugh about it and then you cry about it later, or you work your ass off and you give yourself some type of stronghold, give yourself some type of comfort in the fact that you prepared yourself for this. You prepared for war, whatever that is in your life. So ultimately, from your perspective, before we started recording, you were talking about some of the young kids that train in the gym you train at. Even some of them you train yourself. And they're, 16, 17, 18, maybe even younger. I wouldn't say if you're younger than 16, you probably shouldn't be working out. But ultimately, how do you feed your information and your drive and your passion to them without motivating them, I guess? How do you transfer that energy to them so that they do want to better themselves?
Well, I think for me, a lot of it is making sure that I point out to them that even on days that I don't feel like training, I'm going to train no matter what. It's like, sure, there is a time for auto-regulation, let's say, but it's not usually if my Whoop's telling me that my recovery was trash yesterday, maybe it's just instead of going at an RPE 9 today, I go at an RPE 6 or 7,
Yeah.
Still go through the motions, still knock out some facsimile of a workout. And so for the young guys, I think a lot of it is just teaching them that, like, hey, right now you're young, you're motivated, you're caffeinated, even though you shouldn't be, so yeah, you might be feeling like you're going to crush it right now, but you're not always going to. So you still got to do it either way. But that's not fully to dog on like that, getting the motivation, especially from other people. I can't remember where exactly I heard it, but I heard someone say that they would take a good training partner over a good coach any day of the week. And I'm a coach, I'm biased, but I still think that there's some merit to that, where it's like I try to get my young guys to find a group that they can go work out with and work out the right way. Tell them like, hey, we don't max bench every week. Like that's... I know you're still going to half the time. Like, you may not want to listen to me and your buddies are going to max out, but that's not a good way to train. So for me, it's a lot of it is teaching them, hey, we still go in, we trust the process. Um, and there is a time for calling audibles, auto regulating. And from a coach's perspective, sometimes something will happen where like especially when I was coaching high school soccer, like guys would come to me, or you would just see that somebody's really off for a day, and you like call them over, you're like, hey dude, are you good?
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out like, no, my uncle died in a car wreck last night,
Wow.
and you're
Yep.
like, holy crap, man, like it's okay, you can take a day, like,
Yeah.
go home,
Yeah.
be with your family, come back tomorrow, we'll be all right. And then there are times where like, oh, my girl told me that, she wanted to do XYZ and we didn't end up, like, dude, focus up. Like,
Yeah.
we're focused on what we got to do here. We're trying to win state. Like,
Mm-hmm.
put that crap behind us. Like,
Yeah.
it's, so there's a time for both, for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Well, you made the comment about kids being caffeinated when they shouldn't be. And the culture nowadays is, send your caffeine to the moon, 400, 500 milligrams of caffeine, and then take your supplements and then go be an animal for an hour. And then what do you do after that? Crash. Go play your video games. Yeah. Go be a lazy bum. Like, and I've been on the spectrum where I didn't have to do any of that. Like, where I didn't have to like actually take any type of supplements to help me in that sense. Excuse me. But I also was at a situation in my life where I had tons of energy, where I didn't need any of that. But now it's like, I see these 16, 17-year-old kids are like, oh, I have to have my pre-workout. It's like, what? You're 17 years old. You are filled with piss and vinegar, and you need caffeine?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. I drink 50 milligrams of caffeine. I'm 27, or I'll be 27. I drink 50 milligrams of caffeine, and I feel like my heart's going to explode. These kids are drinking 30 times the amount of what's normal for your body. And they're going in there, like I said, they're being an animal in the gym for an hour. But then the other 23 hours of their day, well, I guess if you subtract 7 hours of sleep, if they even get that,
yeah,
they're just being lazy. They're not actually feeding their body or their mind anymore. They're just dedicating that 1 hour space to being in the gym. And then they think that's enough. Well, I think the gym has a lot of good practices. I think it has a lot of good applications to life, especially if you're going to stress your body in a way that's going to not only help you, build muscle, build endurance, for young men, build a libido that's going to last them when they're, in their 40s, 50s, 60s. But then for women also, toning up their bodies and being able to be strong women. But I just think that a lot of the culture that is surrounding our youth, and we're young, right? People would consider us a youth, sure. But the culture that's surrounding our youth is, stack yourself with all these supplements, go be an influencer for whoever, whatever clothing company or whatever, and dedicate your life to just being a meathead. But in retrospect, you have to take that time to not only be an animal in the gym, but the other, 16 hours you're awake or whatever it is. You have got to be a student. You have to be a steward. You can't just continue on and just think that 1 hour in the gym is enough. And I did not learn that until I was in my mid-20s. I was like, okay, I'm going to the gym for an hour. I'm good. I did my thing for the day. And that's it. That's all that I had to offer for my body for that day. But ultimately, as I got older, I started to realize that, man, okay, I have work. Work's boring. I look forward to going to the gym. But then on my rest days where I don't have anything to do, I'm just lazy. There's no upward mobility there. So treating, and I guess this is something that for any young adult listening or somebody that's trying to gain a perspective on what their actual potential is, treat every day like you are a steward. When you wake up, know that what you are going to do, take ownership of that, but how it manifests, you have no control over. And you have to put yourself in a scenario where you are comfortable with that. Because if you wake up and you tell yourself, I have full control of my day, you've already lost. Like there's no winning that day if that's egotistical. That's completely on a different boundary line. Like you have to wake up and you have to say, hey, I'm going to conquer today, but I have to be a steward with my body and where I'm going to be today. Because you have no idea what's going to happen. Nobody does. So you have to take it one step at a time. With me saying all of that, when you have people in the gym that are in the gym space or even on social media talking about their exercises, a lot of them are putting together a facade that they are in complete control of everything that happens. And everybody's like, well, I want to be like that guy. He controls everything. And it's like, sorry to tell you, but CBum, and that's just one example that I have, like they don't have control of everything. Like even CBum with the way that he trains and works out and how successful he is, he's an advocate for the fact that he is very, very depressed and anxious and doesn't have a grip on his mental stability. And he's, to most young men, the king of the world. Yeah. And this is not I'm not knocking him, but I think that ultimately what that anxiety and depression that's being pulled and being presented is, for him, I think there's he's spending time in the gym, he's working out, he's doing his thing. And I don't doubt that he is doing some type of research on his own and reading and taking care of himself, but there's a missing piece there. There always is a missing piece, and I think it's something to do with stewardship. I think he's at the top of his game. He realizes he's, King Kong, but I think he needs to take a step back and realize that he's just a steward. He just has some type of control over the body that he's in based on free will, but there's uncontrollables around him that again, not a psychologist by any means, but I think there's something he needs to corral there. And it's no different for other kids. There's a lot of other kids that have the same problems, but they either lack to take ownership or they fail to realize that there are things in their life that they cannot control. And that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, I mean, with him, when you see these guys who have a sort of meteoric rise to the top like he does, oftentimes you get that children with dynamite sort of thing where they get to this absolute pinnacle of performance in something. They have a billion eyes on them, and all of a sudden it's like, I mean, it's amazing that anybody doesn't completely fall apart. So it's understandable. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it, yeah. I mean, I tell my guys. So you said, like, if you wake up and you think I have control of what happens today, you are going to fail every time. Yep. Your response is just it's not going to be there. Mm-hmm. But I tell my guys, I have complete control of how I respond to my day every time. And you won't in the beginning, but you have to approach it with that mindset. Yep. Because eventually you can develop to the point that, like, no matter what happens to you, you can't control it, but you know that, and you just go, okay, I take this in. How do I respond? What's the best course of action? Because you're going to get thrown curveballs. Yeah. Everybody, has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, even if you're CBum and you're at the top of your game and you feel like you got everything dialed in, you're going to get curveballs. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's another thing that I tell my guys is, if you have that approach of no matter what happens, I control my response, then over time you get to the point that less things phase you less and less, which is good.
And the response piece is really important too, because that might only be one of the parts of your day that is controllable. I don't control if I wake up. Ultimately, I don't control when I'm hungry or thirsty. To a degree, you can kind of manage that, but I don't control when I wake up. I don't control when I'm hungry or thirsty. I don't control when my body feels tired and I need to go to bed. I don't control my commute to work. I don't control what my boss tells me when I walk in the door. I don't control what happens at work. I don't control, relatively what happens at the gym. I can build my workouts, but like there's very little control in my day. Um, and that's not to discredit people that want to be in control. I like to be in control. I have um a desire to be in control. I've always been like that. But when you know that your day is not going to be controlled predominantly by you, then like you said, the response is, if it's the only thing you can control to situations, then that's a good stepping stone. That's a good, not even just stepping stone, that's a cornerstone to how you can build a foundation with embracing the suck. Um, you know, not only that, but manifesting things that suck in your life to offset things that suck equally as much, or if not more. But you sometimes have to have this, I wouldn't even say out of body experience, because that's like a psychedelic trip type of situation. But you kind of have to, in a way, if you're someone that meditates or somebody that likes to think about their day, you really have to step back and look at who you are as a person, and you have to take a face value of how much you actually control. And I can't remember the last time I've actually done this, but there's an exercise that it's very simple, where you take a piece of paper and you write down what I can control. And it's even like the mundane things, like what I eat, what I drink, the type of words, the type of verbiage I use, the exercises I build in my program, little stuff like that. And then you, on the other side of this, on the page, then you look at what I cannot control. And the goal is to write about 25 things on each side, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it'll add up.
You'll get to like 12 and then you'll be like,
you'll start blanking.
Yeah.
Well, if you can take that piece of paper and you can draw lines connecting all of them, you will feel like you have too much control. And sometimes that can be a bad thing. So the goal is to write down the things you can control and cannot control, and be able to not connect those. You're like, if one of your things is I can control what I eat and drink, but then what things you can't control is when I eat or drink, or when my body is hungry or thirsty, and you try to connect those, then there might be something in your brain telling you, okay, we can control this. We can actually take hold of this. We can make this work. And it's like, ultimately, no, you can't. You can't make that correlation. You have to make sure that these two things are separate. What you can and cannot control. Keeping it simple, hooked on phonics. Can, yes. Cannot, no. So you have to separate those things. And out of personal experience, being somebody that enjoys being in control, trying to make sure that I, plan my day out and make sure that I'm on the same page with everything. And, there might be some things that I can't control, but my response is going to be positive. If that's the way I live my life, I'm constantly going to be anxious and sometimes even distracted and not able to make sound decisions. Where on the flip side, if you can learn how to understand what's not controllable and use that to your advantage. And it sounds so backward, it sounds so goofy. But if you can take what you can't control and use it to your advantage, what type of peace can you actually gain from that? And the only example I can really bring up personally is when you view yourself as a vessel, or you view yourself as the body that you're in, you view it as a form of energy, right? And the things you cannot control is usually negative energy. Most people see that way. If I can take that negative energy and I can use that and recycle that and make it so that I not try to have control on what I can't control, but recycle that in a way that I have a peace about it. And you usually just tell yourself, like when you wake up in the morning, if this is something that can stick in this conversation, when you wake up in the morning, you kind of have to just be like, yeah, I didn't do that. I didn't wake myself up. That's not how this works. So my body told me to wake up. My higher creator, my God, told me to wake up. So now my purpose is driven beyond what I can control. My purpose is now driven from something that's higher, and that purpose also believes in me. So why should I not believe in myself?
Yeah, I think for me a helpful reframe was because I used to think of it sort of in terms of like a negative energy and a positive energy in terms of control, but I think it's more useful most of the time to view it more as a like a chaos and order sort
Hmm.
of thing and not really putting a positive or negative label on it.
Hmm.
Um, because yes, those things that are outside of my control, that is that chaos element, but I can enforce an order on those aspects of it that I want to. Now, there is such a thing as too much order, which I think is mostly common with guys who are hyper dedicated in our space, guys who have been into it for a long time. And
Hmm.
I have gotten in times where I was in that
I
mode.
think we all have.
But most people who are especially newer to the gym, or they're inconsistent with the gym, or they just haven't been in the space as long. Usually it's more of an excess of the things outside of control, the chaos element, and they need to exert some sort of structure and order upon it. And that's where I view things like caffeine almost
Hmm.
as like a tool
Yep.
where you can pull it out as needed. And there's breathing techniques and, all kinds of things like that are tools where it's like, okay, there's this thing that I can't control, or how I feel, let's say. How do I deal with that? Okay, I know that I can, take deep, slow breaths, hold them for a few seconds, take a long exhale. That's going to slow me down. I
Hmm.
can take 2 inhales for every exhale and make them a little quicker. And I can, sort of artificially amp myself up if I'm feeling really lagging, or I can go out in the sun, or there's a million tools that you can pull out of the toolbox when
Hmm.
you've learned it for long enough and how your body responds to it. So
Yep.
that's sort of how I frame it and find really useful to try to instill into people,
Hmm.
um, so that they can regulate how they approach and respond to different outside stimuli.
Hmm. That's like it's a, I guess, a form of recycling that order and chaos, like you just said. And like when we breathe, obviously we, other than, systematic breathing for a specific purpose, like you said, I mean, technically we can't control our breathing if we're just normal. It's something that is
Or
just,
you're at least not conscious
you're
of
not
it.
conscious of it, right? Um, and we can control when we are exposed to the sun, but we can't control when the sun's going to be out, any of that. But that's a great point where if you have something in your life that, you know, you need some type of instrument, or you need some type of extra push or whatever, then there are tools for that purpose. And I think that's the fine line between controlling and what you can control and what you can't control. There's a bridge there. So, but ultimately, I, I think that I'm really, uh, I guess, contemporary in the fact that I I believe that there are some things that we can do to kind of help us a little bit, but ultimately, it's also like I like to be self-sustained, right? I want to be able to be self-sustained. I mean, I drink caffeine and I sun exposure and ice baths and saunas and things like that, but like even some part of me even then is just like, oh man, I would like to do this but be self-sustainable. It's it's hard to not do those things because they make you feel good. They make you feel not only better, but they help you feel motivated, and there's a lot of psychological benefits that go along with it. So, um, what leads me to my next point. Like, what type of modalities do you dive into? What are the things that you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis, or um, even on an hourly basis, that help you feel better, help you feel some type of purpose, I literally hate using the word motivation, but what what are some things what instruments that you use to kind of help propel you in the right direction?
The biggest thing for me is sleep. I'm one of those people that if I get crappy sleep for more than like one day, like one night of bad sleep, I'm okay. As soon as it's for multiple days in a row, and I learned this like when I was in college, I go off a cliff. Like my
Yeah.
immune system drops. I get sick. I feel like garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like the biggest thing's dialing in sleep. So like, a lot of things are, there's resources out there as far as sleep goes, but
Yeah.
if you're in like a very dark room, you want it to be a little bit cooler. Obviously, you want to cut your caffeine, at least 6 hours before you go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how much you're having, because caffeine has a pretty long half-life. I think it's like 6 to 8 hours, something like that.
Relatively. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it has a very long half-life, if you're having, a coffee at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., a lot of these guys, like I'll try to get my high school guys, a lot of them are smashing C4 at 6 p.m. before they work out. And I'm like, you're trying to go to bed at 10
Yeah.
and you just took C4 at
Yeah.
6:30.
Yeah.
No wonder you're having trouble sleeping. So dialing the caffeine back long before then. So like for myself personally, I usually have a little bit of caffeine in the morning, like an hour to an hour and a half after I wake up.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be within about an hour, but I remember seeing something. We were talking about Andrew Huberman earlier,
Mm-hmm.
him saying that you should push it back to at least like an hour and a half after you wake
Yep.
up. So I pushed that back a little bit, and I think that's helped. And then I usually have another small dose at like noon, I would say.
Okay.
And so that way, whenever it gets to be like 10 p.m., I start kind of winding down, getting ready to go to bed. So that's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize.
That's the most important modality.
Yeah.
right
So
there.
so sleep, getting that dialed in is number one. That's like
Mhm.
if you want something highly anabolic, the kids these days are wanting something anabolic. Go to bed.
Go to bed.
Get 8 freaking hours of sleep. Get 9.
Go to yeah, for sure.
But like minimum 7.5. Shoot for 8. If you can get 9, awesome. I try to like on the weekends. I try to get 9.
3 REM cycles is really
Yeah,
really
that's
important.
big. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. Then I'm not a big person who's like, oh, this like one diet like is the end all be all, whether it's keto or Whole30, like whatever you're following.
Yeah.
There are many different ways to skin a cat. All of them just work on very similar principles. And so I've kind of figured out what works great for me. Like essentially, I have the same like snacks every single day.
Mhm.
And then I have regular meals that I kind of rotate. And then I'll do like a cheat meal or two on weekends. That's what works great for me.
Mhm.
That's not the answer. Like people will hear that and they'll go, oh, that's what I need to do. It's, no, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And so that depends, a lot on the client. Creatine, it's one of those things where it's probably the most researched supplement outside of caffeine.
Mhm.
I tell virtually all of my clients, there are some, situations, but it's like you probably should be taking creatine.
Monohydrate.
Monohydrate.
Yeah.
Don't do the there are some,
Other
prop
ones.
blends or whatever
Yeah.
but I think most of the research shows that at best those work about as well as creatine monohydrate. So you might as well just take the cheap monohydrate that we know works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big thing.
And for those that don't know, like creatine monohydrate is people always talk about, well, it just helps your body retain water. It's like, no.
Yeah, no.
Creatine monohydrate is going to help your body intake and absorb certain nutrients, especially branched chain amino acids, which when you have creatine in that sense, and that's what your goal is, and not just to get big and juicy, like you start to realize what it actually does for you. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but
yeah, no. That's
I have to throw
totally
that out
true.
there.
There's
because-
so many
yeah.
misconceptions about creatine, and I have, especially with these like high school guys that I train. Like I have guys who are 20s, 30s, 40s, but the guys who are like 16, 17 and their buddy takes creatine and they're like, should I take creatine? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Like you should. And then mom will text me, later that night and is like, I thought this was a steroid. Like, no, I am not advocating for your son to take anabolic steroids. Like, I'm sorry that I have to, go in depth on this, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's a billion misconceptions on how it makes you retain water. Oh, and I had like a female client, like, oh, I heard that creatine makes your butt bigger, and da da da. I'm like, oh my gosh. So
If you
I
do
mean,
squats twice a
yeah,
week, yeah.
if it helps you squat more weight, then sort of in a roundabout way, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions, and social media like just multiplies that to the nth degree as
Oh.
far as misconceptions
Oh
about
my gosh.
everything. And I see a lot of the young guys. I don't know if you want to like actually get more in depth on this, but a lot of the young guys these days, it's SARMs. Like it is just rampant
They're rampant.
amongst
It's
high school guys. With the gyms that we go to, like a
Mhm.
lot of these guys. But I don't know if you want to like go down that whole rabbit hole. That's a fun rabbit hole for me because I
Yeah.
see it a lot.
Yeah.
I find it absolutely fascinating. But
It's and I mean, again, I don't want to like have to blame social media for everything,
sure,
but you go on social media and you're like, okay, I want to learn about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
First off, people, TikTok is not Google. It's not an encyclopedia. It's
Yeah.
not any way, shape, form, or fashion for you to receive any information that's worth two craps. I mean, there is some good information on there, but
that's
it's all
the
about the
issue.
source.
Is there's tons of great info, great coaches, great athletes,
Yeah.
great information, and there's also tons of terrible information
Terrible information.
that oftentimes goes more viral than the good stuff.
Oh,
So yeah, no, you're totally right there.
yeah. But like in this space where we're talking about like supplements and whatnot, like there are a lot of natural remedies that kind of help with, testosterone or for this matter, helping your muscles be more anabolic without having to jab yourself with a needle or take a bunch of stacks that are ultimately going to kill all your organs. But like, and you just start off real simply with like sauna usage. Like saunas, for example. I'm actually writing a paper right now about sauna usage and how it affects the body, physically, mentally, spiritually, in a way. And with saunas, I say they originated in Finland, but that's incorrect. The traditional sauna we see today was brought up in Finland. The saunas have been used for tens of thousands of years, if not close to 100,000 years, dating back like BC, like that time frame. And with the way saunas were used back then was more for spiritual purpose, spiritual worship, exercising demons, however you see fit. Now, in Finland, when they use traditional saunas, a lot of this information that we have now on sauna usage is surrounding the mental or surrounding the positive impact on mental health. But I think that's overshadowing a lot of what actually goes on physically. So, Dr. Jari Laukkanen, he and a team of guys, they put together a study back in the 80s, and they were talking about middle-aged men. So anywhere from 40 to 55, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm still writing the paper. But a lot of what they were seeing, the benefits there was, how was the sauna decreasing their likelihood of experiencing dementia and Alzheimer's? And what they found was 3 times a week at 19 minutes per session was not the most optimal, but it started a trend inside of your brain to create a pathway to have more dopamine and have more serotonin and decrease. If there's a name of a molecule, I forgot the name of it. I will try to put this in the description. That is linked to dementia and Alzheimer's, and it starts to decrease. So that's a lot of what we're hearing about nowadays. But what we're not hearing is about like heat shock proteins. We hear about that quite often, but it's in the space that, for muscle recovery. But if you're looking at it from an anabolic standpoint, when you are testing your body's limits on heat, especially for that amount of time and that frequently, your body ultimately is giving itself the same benefit as if you were to take, and I'm not going to say take the same amount of anabolic steroids, but it's giving you the same type of benefit. The recovery factor is there. Disclaimer, people, just taking steroids alone does not just automatically make you stronger. You have to work through it. You actually have to work out. Some people think
does to an extent.
To an extent.
There's some interesting research that I've seen where they will have guys. They had, I guess it'd be 3 groups, where they had a group that I think it was like an 8, 12, 10-week study, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They had a group only do a strength training program. I think it was like 4 days a week or something, very standard protocol.
Yeah.
They had a group take some anabolic steroids. I can't remember if it was just like testosterone or something, but some form of anabolics and the same training program.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a group of guys only take the anabolics and intentionally not train. Obviously, the group that took anabolics and trained grew the most muscle.
Yeah.
But the group that only took anabolics actually gained more muscle than the group that trained regularly.
How is that?
Which is surprising. You would figure they would, put on maybe something, but you figure, oh, the stimulus has to be there. Actually, they put on more than the training group.
Yeah.
Now, I would imagine the sustainability is next to nothing. 'Cause obviously, as soon as they're not on, then they're going to lose probably all of it because they're not training.
Yeah.
But that's a very interesting study that kind of surprised me that I saw.
I've
recently.
always wondered too. So if you're taking steroids and there's a reason that most people have to cycle off of them, like the way that a steroid takes a hold. Now, there's different steroids on the market. There's not one size fits all. Sure. But a lot of anabolic steroids on the market are really decreasing your organ capacity, your organ health, specifically your heart and your liver.
Yep.
Kidneys too. Those are usually the 3 things that start going downhill. But, when people cycle off of steroids, a lot of times what's crazy is they don't really lose any muscle mass. They lose a lot of their overall body fat index because of that. It's retaining a lot of that nutrients. So, but that is interesting how if somebody doesn't work out at all and they just take anabolic steroids, first off, how would you do that? Would you need some type of rage room where you can like break a bunch of stuff? Because roid rage is very real. And if you don't have some type of stimulus, if you don't have some type of stimulus to take that just raging testosterone at like 50 RPMs, like how do you just take that and like not feel anything? I don't know. But it is interesting how you can take anabolic steroids and not experience or not have to have a stimulus or exercise and still gain muscle mass.
Yeah.
But to your point, not without the stimulus. Within a 6-week, 8-week period, you're just going to lose it all.
Oh, probably quicker than that.
Probably quicker than that.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah. As well, too, you're also going to have a lot of organ problems. So that's the bit. So,
well, and your natural test levels will crash. If you get on something like that, and especially if you're not trained, like if you aren't training, you're not dialed in. I mean, you'll see guys who, post on forums and things like that where they have zero clue what they're doing, and they're like, "Yeah, I got on trenbolone and blah 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 blah," and you're like, "Holy moly!" Like you have no business being on anything.
How
and
are
you're
you
on the
there?
most ridiculous stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and a lot of them, I mean, they do develop some serious, liver issues because they're popping, all sorts of oral anabolics for months and months on end, and their liver enzymes are all over the place, and they go get blood work done, and everything's ridiculous, and they've got a freaking 170 over 120 blood pressure, and they're popping a nosebleed when they deadlift. And the amount of, it's same thing like from social media. You see these guys who try all kinds of ridiculous stuff and then crash and burn because they have no idea what they're doing.
The athletes that you see, they look like Greek gods, the ones that take steroids, have a lot of scientists backing them and a lot of very prestigious people within that community that are giving these people information and directing them and guiding them on that path. So if you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, strongly urge people to do every bit of research they can before they take steroids. I don't knock steroids. I think people that take them, I'm like, oh, great. I'm happy for you. Just don't die and
Yeah.
don't hurt yourself. So, and it's one of those things where like in social media, it's becoming a very big popular topic, and I think a lot of people are looking for their heroes like Sebum. Um, I can name a handful of others, but ultimately they're like, I want to be him. I want to be that big. I want to be that strong. But ultimately, like I said, those guys have tons of resources at their disposal to do that type of work. So if you don't have the resources,
Probably.
if you don't have the
shouldn't.
facilities for that, I would say tread lightly.
Well, and people also don't realize, oh, yes, they have, they're getting the best quality stuff. They're getting monitored by doctors. They're doing everything the right way.
Medical grade.
Yeah, which usually is true. But they also don't realize that Chris Bumstead was a freak athlete before he took steroids.
Yeah.
And, anybody who is at the pinnacle of, like for myself, like I'm a weightlifter, I'm into the Olympic weightlifting a lot.
Mhm.
All of those guys, if they were at the top level, they were a freak athlete before they took steroids. Before they took them, they are at where most or above where most guys would be if they took them their whole lives.
Yep.
And people don't realize that. There was a weightlifter who was, I believe he was with the Bulgarian national team. I can't remember his name off the
Those
top
dudes
of
are
my
just
head.
born to lift weights.
And he was, I think when he was 17, he was snatching, I think like 160 kilos, something like that, and clean and jerking 190 or 200 kilos, something like that.
Cow.
At age 17 and naturally, like fully natural.
Yeah, they're on USADA protocol.
Now he's huge.
Yeah.
Oh no, this was there's no USADA. This was 1980 Bulgaria.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so fully natural. He's snatching like 160, 170, clean and jerking 190, 200, and that's in kilos, by the way. So like he's snatching 355 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
Clean and jerking 420 to 440 pounds, something like that. And so this was natural. And then the national team coach, Ivan Abajev, who's like the butcher, he's known for just beating athletes into the ground. Like you were either going to wash out and go to the coal mines, or you were going to be like a gold medalist at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And the way these guys trained was absolutely insane. It's fascinating. But he got on steroids, and the dosages. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Zach Tellender did a podcast with Derek from More Plates, More Dates, where they went in depth into the dosages and the doping
Milligrams
protocols
per
of these.
deciliter, microgram. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And the actual dosages of the pills, because we have the records of what they took.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is insane. But he went from those numbers, which are already freakish, and I think he put, I want to say it was 20 kilos on his clean and jerk in like 2 months. And he gained like, I don't know, 16 kilo, like 30 or 40 pounds of body weight in 2 months, and like got silver at the European Championship, something like that.
Holy cow.
So they're putting on just obscene amounts of stuff, but people don't realize it's not that the steroids took him from a 200-pound clean and jerk to a 460-pound clean and jerk. It's naturally at age 17, he was already at a 400-pound clean and jerk. It just took him to 450.
Yeah.
So the perspective, I think, is skewed because people think, oh, that guy's at that insane level. He took gear to get there. If I take gear, I'm going to get there. No, he's already a mile ahead of you before he touched anything.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I think that's another important perspective to have.
I was looking up so it's 2.25 pounds for every kilogram. So if you just do simple math, how many kilos was he clean and jerking?
I think he hit 220.
It's 440 pounds on a clean and jerk.
484,
480.
I think would be
Yeah, because it's
220.
2.205. I can put it all together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah. So,
Like that's on a level. So I am very, very, very new to Olympic lifting, CrossFit lifting. My shoulders are completely screwed up, so I don't do any snatching.
baseball.
Yeah. So I think it's better for me not to snatch because of the flexibility in my shoulders. I have flexibility, but the stability is a little off. I'm working on it. But for clean and jerk, I feel like that's a little bit more comfortable for me. But my max on clean and jerk is like, I won't use kilos because we live here in America. Is I think 100 and it's 180. The last time I did clean and jerk was 180 pounds, which I thought that's ecstatic.
Yeah.
It's not that heavy when you think about a clean and jerk movement. So,
But it's also heavier than, 95% of guys in the gym can do.
oh yeah, but that's my max though. Like that's like going in there jazzed up, a little bit of caffeine in my system, and feeling great.
Good, yeah.
Feeling great. On a day where I'm not feeling so great, and my lower back is kind of giving me some issues, then I'll hit 172, 174, and be happy with it. But I can't wrap my mind around that. And to your point of people that were athletic before they took steroids, gear, whatever you have, I was not built to be an athlete. Like if you look at both of my parents, my dad played baseball growing up. My mom was in dance. So I have some athletic attributes. But I by no means am a physical specimen by any sense of the word. It takes me 6 months to put on 10 pounds of muscle. And that's if I'm working 4 to 5 days a week and eating a calorie surplus of over 1,000 over. That's the body that I have. I can't just eat a bunch of steak and vegetables and just get ripped. I have to go the extra mile. So to give you a perspective, I was 140 pounds my freshman year of high school. And
you got me beat by a lot there, buddy. I was like $120.
Well, I also came down. I was 195 in middle school, so I lost a bunch of weight. I was a
thick boy.
I was a chubby kid in middle school, and part of that is diet and lack of exercise and genetics. So when I lost all that weight, got down to 140 in high school, I was skinny as a rail. I was tiny. That was freshman year. I got into my senior year, and I did everything I could just to get up to 170 pounds. It took me 3.5 to 4 years to put 30 pounds of weight on, and I was like, maybe I'm just not built for this. Maybe I'm just not built to grow muscle. And it was really funny at the time because once I finally got to a position where I was like, okay, I'm actually steadily gaining muscle. My body fat's dropping down a little bit. Dislocate my shoulder. So I was actually gaining some pretty good progress. But even today, like my metabolism's not what it used to be. I have modalities that I do to kind of mitigate that, to try to get my metabolism back on track. But it takes me forever. Like no one's going to look at me and go, oh, he takes steroids. There's no way. Like there's not a single person on the planet that can be like, yeah, he's just holding on by a thread. So I mean, there's ways that I have, like, I'm more geared towards like the, flexibility and stuff like that. I want to be more flexible more than I want to be more.
You want like long-term sustainability.
Yes. Yeah. I want to be 75 years old and still going on 5 to 10 mile hikes with my wife and still enjoying that type of stuff. Yep. Because let's be realistic here. There's not a 75-year-old man on the planet that's going to clean and jerk or snatch that amount of weight. So 17 to 75. I just want
to squat 600 and get knee replacements when I'm 45. So like, we all got our goals,
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's awesome because you've kind of built like, I mean, most guys can't clean and jerk 185 pounds. Most guys can't go in the gym and do, I've seen what you do in the gym and like, you're a pretty fit dude. So you had to like, even though you didn't have a genetic predisposition to it, you had to work really hard.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because like so I have 2 younger brothers. There's 3 of us. And myself and baby brother got the athletic genes. Like my dad's 6'7" and like 330. It was like, an athlete. My mom's really small, but she was a gymnast. She was always super athletic. I
Wow.
remember
Yeah.
her doing backflips when she was like 40.
Wow.
You know? And so the middle brother is shockingly unathletic.
Really?
It's kind of fun, you know. He accepts it. He
Yeah.
embraces his fate. But he's been doing the online coaching that I've done, and so he works really hard, and he's lost 20 pounds. And I got his wedding card the other day, and I was looking at it, and I was like, his shirt goes in at the bottom
Yeah.
instead of
It's
out
not
at the
out
bottom.
anymore.
Yeah. So, so that's awesome. But then, like, my youngest brother, he's been doing my online coaching, and he went from his max bench when we started was 175 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
He was 21, I think, when he started. He's only been doing it less than a year, like 10 months. He's 22. So this was starting just under a year ago. His max bench was 175, and he put on, I would say, 40 pounds, 45 pounds, something like that. Pretty much all muscle.
Yeah.
Like, that was him walking around at like 205, 210. He's a little taller. He's 6'1" or something.
Yeah.
Walking around at 10% body fat, 12% body fat, striations, veins, diced up. And his bench went from 175 to 335 or 340 in 10 months.
Wow.
Full
That's
natural,
really good.
nothing.
Yeah.
Like, if he were on anything, he'd have, come to me for it or told me, So
Yeah.
it's like, I know that that's fully natural. And like most guys naturally maybe could never get to a 340 bench in their entire life.
No, I'm not touching that.
Yeah. And he
There's
did
no
it in less than, he's at 10 months now. He did it a month or two ago. So in 8 months,
Yeah.
he went from 175 to 335.
Jesus.
While being, and it's not like he got fluffy. I mean, that is while he's absolutely peeled.
Yeah.
And so it's shocking how much genetics play a role.
A giant role.
Yeah. Like the role.
Right. So.
And, so it's not, I don't say that to like, put a limit on people. It's like, you can still get insane amounts of progress. You just might have to strap in a little more, and it might take you a lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the people that we see in the gym, like, it's fairly obvious. Now, if you went up and asked them, they'd probably be like, no, I'm natural. But you can go up to most of the men, even some of the women in our gym, and be like, hey, are you on gear? I know. Come on. Like, I know. And they're gonna be like, no, I'm natural. I've been doing it for 20 years. And I'm like, there's just no way, right? So, but from a perspective of like genetics, like, I promise you right now, the genetics I come from is potato farmers in Ireland, and they're not very tough. They just know how to pick potatoes. Like, people that come from descendants of Nordic backgrounds, Bulgarian backgrounds, Russian backgrounds, Australian backgrounds, those types of people in the genetic pool are much more likely to be, barbaric in the gym. So, just look at the men that play rugby. Like, look at the men in those countries that play rugby. Like, those guys probably lift weights, but they're just tough as nails. Yeah. But then you have a lot of, like, a big hodgepodge of people in the United States where some people don't even really know where they came from, and then trying to figure out their genetics and stuff. So I do feel for people, though, that don't really have the ability to put on muscle or anything like that. I feel bad for myself sometimes because I'm like, I've been working my ass off for 6 months, and I've only put on about 7 pounds of muscle. Like, it is frustrating. But I will say 100%, the only supplements I take are a green supplement. I don't even take creatine. I haven't taken any. I would like to, but all I take is a green supplement, and then every now and again I'll take a sleeping supplement that's good for metabolism boosting. That's about it. So, but a lot of what I'm doing, I just want to be more sustainable on my diet. But I've talked about this with Colby. I've talked about this with a couple of other people. It's like, if you want to take it to the next level, you kind of have to add something else in that mix. And I think creatine is probably my next step. I won't get into the pre-workout space. I think I'm already jazzed up enough. Like I don't need all that. But yeah, it just takes me a lot longer to build muscle. And so, like I mentioned, like my clean and jerk, like that was like 5 months ago. I am petrified to do that again. Like I don't
Yeah.
even know how I did that because my ramp up, like I started doing some Olympic lifting 3 years ago, but it was sparingly. It was like every now and again, like once every couple of weeks, I'd do some Olympic lifts. Now I try to implement it in at least twice a week for myself. But you know, I do power cleans quite often, but ultimately I do power cleans because I like the um, cardiovascular output from it, and I don't do a whole lot of weight. I really just want to focus on my form, focus on getting my heart rate up, amping that up, starting my workouts with that, and then going into like yesterday for my leg day. Like I started off with power cleans, and that was
Yeah, I think doing power cleans for like, kind of moderate weight, moderate reps is a great way to build work capacity.
yes,
For sure.
yeah. But then I have to figure out for myself, like, do I want to go down that road of Olympic lifting so often? And you do it. You do it every how often would you say that you do Olympic lifting? Like on a weekly basis?
It depends what sort of training cycle I'm in. So, like a couple years ago when I was pushing I wanted to get the 500 squat. Like that was like, I want to squat 500 raw natty.
Yeah.
And so during that training cycle, I think I might have quit doing clean and jerks during that cycle, and I snatched once or twice a week.
Okay.
Because it was like I'm doing like 5x5 at 425, and it takes me like 45 minutes to an hour, and I want to kill myself,
Yeah.
So like you can't do clean and jerks while training like that. So it was brutal. So in a cycle like that, virtually none, but most of the time, like right now, I snatch 3 days a week and I clean and jerk 2 days a week.
Okay.
And I'm training 6 days a week. So usually 1 day a week, I will just front squat or back squat, and I won't do any Olympic lifts.
Okay.
But
and how does that feel on your joints? Like like when you wake up in the morning, do you feel like you got ran over by a train, or do you feel like you're just like, okay, this is normal?
I feel like a savage at all times. No, I
A savage that's
occasionally
limping to the toilet so you can go take a
yeah,
piss. Yeah.
occasionally I have like a knee from soccer that'll give me some issues.
Mhm.
But actually as I've done more like PT related stuff, bands and stuff, that's pretty much fixed itself. Occasionally if I go really heavy on cleans or front squats, it'll act up on me.
Mhm.
But and I think a lot of it is just because my Olympic lifts relative to my strength numbers aren't that high. So like my best clean and jerk's 150 kilos, so like 330.
Okay.
But that was with my back squat being just under 500 pounds.
Okay.
And so if you were trying to clean and jerk 330 pounds and your best back squat's 385, that's there are a lot of guys that are like that.
Mhm.
But doing that 300 plus pound clean is going to beat you up pretty bad. Whereas
Yeah.
like for me, a 300 plus pound clean is like a relatively low percentage of my pulls and squats.
Yeah.
So it doesn't beat me up that much. So I think it helps to have a big reserve of strength
Mhm.
in terms of longevity. If you want an Olympic lift, it's like you should probably get strong first.
Mhm.
And then you can push those numbers and it's not going to beat you up.
Yeah.
So
That's true. Yeah, that's why there's a graph that I kind of use every now and again that talks about different lifts and the output. I'm gonna see if I can find it. There's different lifts and the output of energy that's used during those lifts, and it's always recommended to do those at the beginning of your workout. Let me see if I can find that. It's an older one. But with those lifts, obviously like your clean and jerks, your snatches, your compound movements, your squats, your deadlifts, those types of movements are always meant to be done towards like the beginning of your exercise because that's where your
Yes.
energy is coming from. The number one thing that I see people do, and this it hurts my back watching it. They'll go and they'll do like a hack squat or do like some Bulgarians and single leg Bulgarians would do all of that first, and then they'll come over and like deadlift. And I'm like, you're already doing two other compound movements. That's not a problem. But when you come over to do a deadlift, now you're really diminishing the output that you're getting. If you're used to deadlifting, 350, 400 pounds, and you've been doing those exercises beforehand, you come over and you try to get that, you're not going to have the same output. So your body obviously has a gas tank. But in retrospect, like I have tried to, when it comes to Olympic lifting, like there's no way in my mind that I can do Olympic lifting on that same type of level. Like I have to do it once a week and put it into one session. And then outside of that, the rest of it is just hypertrophy training because I'm trying to protect my joints. And that's just from the lack of stability that I've had for most of my life playing baseball. Like the flexibility is kind of there, the ability to, have endurance training is there. But baseball players are not built to lift super duper heavy. I mean, to a degree, some of them are very strong, but it's really just it's muscular endurance to the nth degree, and then you add in some strength when you want to, bash baseballs and throw the ball hard. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very,
Well,
very.
and I don't like with very few of my clients do I actually use the Olympic lifts. There are a
Mhm.
few that I'll do like hang clean pulls or something if I want to work upper back
Sure.
and traps.
Yeah.
More athletic guys that want to be explosive,
Mhm.
I'll use things like that, or maybe like dumbbell snatches. So there are variations maybe that I'll use on occasion. But if someone wants to, you know, lose 15 pounds of belly fat, your stereotypical thing, I'm not going to have them do snatches or clean and jerks. The bang for your buck just isn't there.
Mhm.
And even guys who want to, they have physique oriented goals. They're wanting to up their bench press and they want to make their arms bigger and,
Mhm.
pull
Yeah.
ladies at the beach, whatever it is. I'm still probably not going to have them do uh, snatches or jerks. I might have them do power cleans or hang cleans,
Mhm.
or clean pulls.
Yeah.
But yeah, those kinds of things. If someone comes to me, and I have had guys that I train that are like, I want to do a weightlifting competition, or they're sometimes I've worked with CrossFit athletes who are like, hey, my work capacity is good. I'm a cardio savage, but my Olympic lifts suck.
Mhm.
And so they'll come to me for help with that. And then we're going on a weightlifting focused program. We're gonna snatch. We're gonna clean and jerk.
Mhm.
Obviously, but yeah, that's just something I do like for my own training. That's not like if you want to, you know, if you have physique oriented goals, things like that. No, it's the bang for your buck just isn't there.
Yeah.
It just looks cool.
If somebody is going for a physique oriented type of exercise, obviously just like the pillars of exercise. I mean, you have your stability, you have your flexibility, you have muscular endurance, you have hypertrophy, and you have power training. When you put all that in perspective, how much of your time is even really spent in power training whenever you're looking for physique? Very little. I mean, probably, maybe one or two of your lifts every week might be. Um, but I feel like a lot of it for physique is, hypertrophy. It's a good mix between hypertrophy and stability. Muscular endurance is kind of there, but when you put those two together, like you're working on that mobility, you're working on the flexibility, which is going to give you that lean striation. But at the same time, you need to be hypertrophic about your exercises. So I wouldn't say it kind of bridges over muscular endurance because there's a certain degree when you're cutting where you want that. But I mean, what a lot of your clients that you work with, when they want that physique, where do we start? How do they stay on that path? And then ultimately, like, how long does it typically take somebody to get on that? It depends on the person, but how long does it take somebody to get there?
Yeah, I mean, it completely depends on goals.
Mm-hmm.
Some people come to me and they, like I have a guy that I'm coaching right now who has been working out for a long time. He's a decently athletic guy. And he just came to me and he's like, hey, dude, my bench press has stalled at, I believe it was either 260 or 265. And it's stalled there for like 6 months. He's like, dude, I want to get these numbers up. He also wanted to pull his squat and stuff up as well. But he's like, hey, dude, my lifts have just absolutely stalled out. And so he came to me for that. And I basically told him, I'm like, I don't know what your top end is, but I know how to build a smart program. And so for him, it was like, I had him do a little bit of power stuff, so like hang clean pulls, some dumbbell snatches, some plyo jumps, depth jumps. Um, but those would be maybe twice a week for his like explosive plyo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you were talking about with your how you structure the workouts, like yeah, that explosiveness work is going to be at the very beginning after the warm up, and then after that you're going into your big compound lifts. And I like to just generally stick with one big compound per day. And then usually for a guy like him who's decently advanced, we'll go into maybe a second compound, but it's just not as big. So like I might start him out with a flat barbell bench or an incline bench, and then we're going into say like a seated dumbbell press or something like that. That's still a compound movement, but instead of doing 5 sets of 4 pretty heavy, maybe we're going 3 or 8 sets of 8. And then past that, then you get into that hypertrophy focused work where you can knock out your supersets, or you can go into myo reps and drop sets, all that jazz.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. the the funny thing about nowadays is there's so many different splits. Like people will kind of split up their weeks and make it so that they optimize their training and whatnot. It's like you got the bro split, and then you got the legs, arms, back, shoulders, whatever split that you're doing, right? And again, based on the goals. But if just for a hypertrophy purpose, or with the splits that even you use in your personal training, are you more of a push pull guy? Or are you more of a mixing up like arms and legs, or do you kind of how do you approach that?
So that obviously depends on goals. A lot of the split I based off of how many days the person can train.
Okay.
So like if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, listen, like let's say they're a dad, they got 2 or 3 kids, they got to run around, they're working, they're busy. I can make it into the gym 2 days a week for sure, maybe 3. A guy like that, I'm going to have him train like full body
Hit
every
cardio.
day.
Yeah.
It's going to be like you're training total body. We're going to hit weights every day. We're going to hit cardio every day. And it's basically going to be you're getting upper focus stuff, you're getting lower focus stuff. Because then whether you get in 1, 2, 3, or 4 days in the week, because your schedule's crazy and it's just not as high of a priority, train total body. Because if you, let's say you're only training consistently like 2 days a week is your target, and it's on Monday and Thursday, and Monday is your upper body day, Thursday is your lower body day. Let's say 2 weeks in a row, you only get in on Monday. Maybe you're training upper body twice and lower body none. Versus if you train total body, then at least with that inconsistent schedule, you can maximize bang for your buck.
Yeah.
Then if somebody's training, let's say 4 days a week, I might put them on an upper lower split. I might still do total body. It depends more on their goals if that's the case. My guys who are doing like 5 or 6 days a week, I really like a push-pull leg split. I think that hits kind of the right balance of resting. You're getting 48 hours between repeat hitting each muscle group. So that's a very sufficient recovery period, but you're still getting to hit everything twice a week versus if you do like you have a shoulder day and an arm day and this and that, you're hitting everything once a week, which is still sufficient. And that's an approach. But I've found that like an upper lower can be good if you're in that 3 to 4, maybe 5 day a week. But further down, myself, I freaking love push-pull legs. It's one of those things. Occasionally I change it, and I'm doing Olympic lifting 5 or 6 days a week. So like my legs are kind of getting worked every day. My shoulders are kind of getting worked every day. But I've built up to that. I'm not going to start off training 5 or 6 days a week.
That's true.
Weightlifting.
What's the duration of, and again, it's goal specific, right? But if you had to pick a sweet spot for exercise where you feel like you've emptied the gas tank to a degree, you have a little bit left in there, but you don't want to overtrain, what's a good platform, or a good, what's the word I'm looking for? What's a good way to kind of evaluate how long each workout session should be? because for me, I'm really like dogmatic. I'm like, okay, I have to be at the gym for an hour and 15 stretch, an hour of whatever I'm doing. And I usually don't leave until that hour is up. But sometimes I feel like I overtrained, and that's worse for you than not training at all. Like some people will say, well, you got in the gym and you overtrained, but ultimately what you're doing is you're breaking down muscle fibers and muscle tissue to a microscopic degree. But when you overtrain in that sense, you cause a lot more damage downstream. And that's where you get into injuries and things of that nature, right? Um, but what's a good way to kind of evaluate how long an exercise should be or your workout should be, and based on what exercises you're approaching with it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the eternal caveat of it depends on your goals. It depends on who you
Yeah.
are, blah blah blah. I really like to start very new people out with more like a 45 minutes type time frame.
Yep.
Um, if they're adding in cardio, maybe an hour. And then I think most people who've been working out for a decent amount of time, usually about an hour is really good. um, More advanced guys, or if you're doing a lot of compounds that are really heavy where you need, 5-7 minute rest period.
Mm-hmm.
Like my guys, if I have a kid who comes in who's 15 or 16, I'm teaching him how to back squat. He's back squatting 95 pounds for sets of 5. He can do that 95 for a set of 5, and that 5th rep can be like, not RPE 10, but he's very tired.
Yeah.
He can rest for 90 seconds and he can go hit another set of 5. If I'm doing sets of 5 at 400 and something pounds on back squat at the same RPE as him, I'm not going to be able to do it again in 60 seconds or 90 seconds. That's so guys who are more advanced where you need the longer rest period on your big compounds, let's say you're doing weightlifting or some athletics focused stuff, then you'll probably need a little longer than an hour.
Yeah.
So like for myself, most of my workouts are about an hour 15.
Okay.
My more Olympic lifting focused days might be an hour and a half. If I'm doing cardio and stuff, it might be slightly longer, but sometimes I'll break it into 2 sessions and I'll do like the bulk of my stuff earlier in the day and it's maybe an hour. And then I'll come back in, or, I'm at the gym all the time, so it's can't be done this way for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But then I do a little hypertrophy work and then stretch for 10 minutes and then do 20 minutes of incline treadmill, let's say.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends, but I think a lot of it's based on not only goals, but how advanced you are, where you're at, how much time you can dedicate, those kinds of things.
It's kind of hilarious because when I go to the gym for an hour and 15 and I say the first 15 is mobility, it's like, that's not just what I want to do, that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
Because it's like I have a situation where I have a really tight lower back. I've had two different scenarios where I've torn my hamstring. I have really bad ankle flexion. And I have bad shoulders. So it's like downstream. It's from head to toe for me, and head to neck, I guess, where I have to have some type of mobility put in because like I am not prone to injury by any means, but if I don't do that, I notice it way more the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Like like yesterday, like I did legs and I had to kind of speed up my mobility training a little bit more. And then I'm feeling it more today. Like my knees are a little bit more achy. My hips are a little bit more tight. And I didn't have some type of cool down period. So, but ultimately when it comes to like mobility and when it comes to things that you implement with each client, right? What is a mobility exercise that you just can't, that you put in for pretty much everybody? What is that one mobility exercise that's going to help anybody that needs it?
Essentials. Ooh.
Yeah.
For me, I would have to say mobility, the like number one bang for your buck is sitting in the bottom of a low squat for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is trying to get remotely good at squatting and pulling, they want to get more athletic, they want to get more mobile, literally just sitting in the bottom of a squat, working into those ankles and hips, and setting a timer. So like I'll tell people start out with say like 2 minutes. maybe even a minute starting out.
Yeah.
Just do that before your workout. And that's like bare minimum. I think everybody should be doing that. And then pretty quickly you can escalate to like 3 minutes, I would say. I like to go, most of my sessions, I'll do that for like 2 or 3 minutes before I start.
Yeah.
When I was more focused on building my mobility, when I was a little more lacking a few years back, I would do it for like 5 minutes before every session.
Wow.
Just sit in the bottom of a squat. And I would do other mobility focused stuff, but if I had to pick like that's all I can do, which I like coming up with like if you can only pick, a certain, sometimes I'll talk to people about like, okay, you're trapped in the jungle, you got to survive, you only get 4 lifts, like stuff like that's
Yeah.
really fascinating to think
Yeah.
through and how people would approach it.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, mobility wise, sit in the bottom of a squat.
Is that with or without resistance or weight?
Start without.
Okay.
You can do it sitting with like a kettlebell at your chest.
Yeah, 10, 15, really light.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you have lacking dorsiflexion, your ankle mobility is not good.
Check.
Same. I like to do is set like a small kettlebell on top of my quad, kind of lean into it, start really light, push out over it.
Yeah.
And you can do that while you're in that squat, and you can go, just alternate 30 seconds each side, do that 2 or 3 times. Like that's been fantastic for me personally.
Yeah.
So that's one way that you can approach it. Definitely. You can also do it with a barbell across the top of your legs and work into them that way. It's same kind of idea.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most important, because even you see little kids, they'll get into a really deep squat and hold it for hours, and it's like intrinsic. It's like for us, that should be normal for us. A little bit of a backstory: I actually tore a portion of my meniscus on like the lateral side, and it's like this little flap. And I went to 2 different doctors, and one said you need surgery. The other one said, well, technically you don't, but eventually you're gonna have to get that removed because it's gonna break off and it's gonna float around. And I was asking them about, hey, what do you think causes that? And they both said, well, do you do deep squats? And I was like, well, absolutely. Why would you not? And they said, well, with the way that the knee joint hinges and how much pressure you're putting onto it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, let's back up a little bit, because I'm not trying to challenge a doctor by any means. I mean, like, just because
I have spicy takes.
So. Yeah, just because of the fact that they're wearing a white coat doesn't mean that they're, end all be all. But like, I don't want to like sit here and like cause a disruption with this guy's time. But it's like when you get into that deep squat position, yeah, your meniscus is going to take a lot of that force. It's a nice pad that's going to separate, a lot of those, your femur bone and then your shin bones and all that stuff. But when you have that amount of flexion in the knee, then you have to do something as a prep for that type of exercise. And when you sit in that deep squat, opening up the hips, working on your dorsiflexion, which for those that don't know, dorsiflexion is where you take your foot flat on the ground, then you want to take your knee as far forward as possible over the toe. Now, you don't want to go too far because that's not going to be good. Yeah. But you want to get to that nice, comfortable knee over toe situation. But like when you talk to any doctors about it, they're always like, deep squats, bad. Deep squats, bad. Deep squats are terrible for your knees. And it's like, I see people that work on their mobility and their connective tissue strength, and they have no issue with it. So I think that deep squat ultimately is giving you that sense of stretch, but also that sense of deep connective tissue strengthening that a lot of people need. So, and that's a very rare thing I see in the gym. Most people don't sit there and hold a deep squat for more than 15, 20 seconds and go, oh, I'm good.
Or for at all.
At all. Yeah. So that's something that, these little tiny connective tissue strengthening exercises, mobility exercises that not only are good for you, but to a lot of degrees they're necessary. I wish I was the guy that could walk into the gym and just, do all my exercises without having any mobility. That'd be great. Yeah. But then I'd pay the price later. So what is your thoughts on foam rolling? What are your thoughts on doing any type of like SMR, self-myofascial release, whether it be from a foam roller or a Theragun or something of that nature? How do you kind of approach that?
That's one of those things that, from what I've seen, the research is A little spotty.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely been some studies that show that it can help. It's one of those things where, like, for me, if you feel like it helps you and you train better, whether that's somewhat a placebo or the thing actually helping you,
Mm-hmm.
freaking do it.
Do it.
If you got
Yeah.
a foam roll for 5 minutes on your lats and you feel like that opens you up better for your overhead stuff and your front squats, why wouldn't you do it? Of course. It's something that I personally I really like a Theragun on my quads. I feel like it helps me.
Mm.
There are guys who swear by foam rolling, swear by those kinds of things. I personally think it's one of those things that it's not like as high priority for me as some of the mobility exercises, as some of the strength exercises,
Mm.
as sleep, let's say.
Yeah.
But if you've got those things dialed in and you want to add that as a component,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
I used to be a huge advocate for like foam rolling, but when I did it, it's because I was trying to put a band-aid on on a low back issue that I had, and it helped out a little bit. But ultimately, you know, foam rolling and SMR, all it's doing is applying pressure to that muscle group. And when you apply pressure, then what you're doing is you're breaking up some of that, whether it be scar tissue or something of that nature, whether it be a tight connective tissue problem, um, and allowing more blood flow into those areas. Because what most people don't know is when you tear a muscle, there's a lot of blood flow to that muscle. So it's going to over time it's going to heal itself. Now, unless you have some type of really really weird odd
Full tear or something. Yeah.
degenerative disease where it's or a full tear where you need some type of surgery, but a particular tear, anything that's a half tear or less, it's pretty much going to heal itself. Take some time. Um, but connective tissue, so like your humerus joint, your shoulder joints, knee joints, those areas are not don't have the sufficient blood supply that you would expect of muscles to have. Ankle joints too. Um, and the way it was explained to me was when you have a connective tissue, tear, dislocation, whatever, and you're separating those areas from one another, then you're basically relying on capillaries to provide the nutrients to those areas, which to a degree, I mean, they can provide some type of nutrients to those areas, but you're not getting as enough oxygenated blood. You're not getting near enough, um, you know, BCAAs or branched chain amino acids to those areas to rebuild. So it's kind of fascinating. I dislocated my shoulder 5 times, had surgery to repair it, and at the time it wasn't really talked about, but like stem cells are becoming more popular. They're really expensive, or you have to go out of the country to get them. But with stem cells, that type of treatment is becoming more available. If you have the funds to do it, and the regenerative factor of it is bananas. Like people that have completely messed up joints are going and getting stem cells, doing like 6 sessions, pairing it with some physical therapy, and they're brand new. Like to a point where rabbit hole. If you have enough stem cells, it's actually predominantly female stem cells. They're actually 8 times stronger than male stem cells. But the but when you have that type of therapy, I'm thinking in like 50 years from now, surgery might be really sparing. It might be very spare. Like it might be something that may not be as popular because now we have these types of modalities to help us. Um, but ultimately, outside of stem cells, the only thing that really helps is mobility, physical therapy. Thanks for that. But it's one of those fascinating things where you kind of look at the literature and you're like, this is where mobility down the road, when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
if you're not practicing that mobility, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Yep.
And I even have people in my family, loved ones, that they're getting a little bit older and they're really not very active. And they plan their life like they're going to live into their 80s and 90s, maybe even to 100, which would be great. I'd love that. I think anybody should have that type of mindset. But if you are not if you're not doing some type of modality every single day, you don't have to go to the gym, you don't have to lift weights, you don't even have to go on a run. You can go for a walk or on a small hike for 30 minutes and then spend another 30 minutes of your time doing mobility work. Will people that are older, will they even need medication for arthritis? Like, will they even need situations where they have to, take all these medications to, for blood thinners and stuff like that? But it's just not talked about. And it's kind of frustrating because all of the things that go into our society is all about, here's an immediate fix. If it's not immediate, then it's going to make you feel better momentarily, and then it will fix it eventually. And you're just relying on all of these medications or relying on all these modalities that don't actually help or improve what needs to be focused on like pinpoint that.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why, because we have like CDC and all these other places that tell us what we need to do, or the World Health Organization. A lot of them are just like, yeah, eat vegetables and stay active for, 45 minutes a week. And you think about that, like, 45 minutes a week. I spend more time on my phone than I do. If that's the case, most people spend more time on their phone than they do exercising. So it's like the little mundane stuff are, if we can easily input that into our lives. 30 minutes on a walk, not that hard. 30 minutes of mobility work, there's tons of good resources out there for that. But why is it that as a country we continue to just rely on all of these, like I said before, these little medications that don't really provide any, they provide like short-term relief, and then eventually it'll help you. It's like, no, eventually, if I count my weeks out over a calendar year, and I'm like, okay, I'll be 27 in May. If I want to live to be 85, let me put that on a calendar. How many weeks is that? Okay. Well, what is eventually? Is it eventually like 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Am I going to be 80 when this problem is done? So I think when you have somebody that tells you that, hey, this will be fixed eventually, but you have the means to fix it more on an expedited path, why would you not? Yeah. I don't know. It's something that's been heavy on my mind. Like I said, because I have family they're not very active, and it's saddening because they have the means to go and do and be mobile, and they are incredibly blessed to still be here. But it's difficult to look at somebody, especially someone in your family, and be like, hey, you're not doing good. You're doing X, Y, and Z. I don't know why that's so hard. Why can't it be just easier to be like, hey, you have got to get off your ass. You have got to do something. You have to move, go on a walk, do whatever it is. And a lot of older generations, they just rely on their doctor to tell them, oh, you're healthy, you're doing good. You don't have anything else you need to work on. I think just stay with what you're doing. If I'm a doctor, or if you're my doctor and you tell me that, I'm either roundhouse kicking you in the face, or I'm just going, hey, I'm not using you as a doctor.
Yeah, it's shocking. One of my clients, who's also a good friend of mine, he's a resident right now, and he is a client of mine because he has no clue what to do in terms of health and fitness.
And he's a resident. He's getting his doctorate.
He's currently an ER doc.
Wow. Okay.
And so, he knows that it's probably better for him to eat chicken, vegetables, and fruit than it is to eat a Big Mac. Sure. Yeah, he knows those kinds of very basic things. Yeah. But in terms of how to structure a workout, how many calories I need to eat per day, how many grams of protein, supplementation, all kinds of things, he has no clue. Mm-hmm. And that's not dogging on him. He knows way more about the human body than I ever will, in terms, neurochemistry and all kinds of ridiculous things, because he's had to study for years and years and years and work his butt off. Yeah. But he's he's a very high. Like I think he's going to be like head resident or something. He's very high achieving, but in terms of actually functional health and fitness, and I don't mean functional in terms of like CrossFit. I mean functional in terms of having a healthy day-to-day life.
Yeah.
He just doesn't really know what to do,
Mhm.
and so that's why he started working with me. And it's like, you're a doctor, it's not like you're outdated, you got your MD 50 years ago, and so, the times have changed. It's like, no, like he's getting his MD literally right this instant.
Mhm.
And there's no fun. It's all just, oh, if A, then B, take this drug, take that drug.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
We've been taught that for such a long time now, but it's like the and I'm not one that gets all like political in that stance, but you have a lot of people in our government, local, state, and then all across, the United States
especially at
government,
a federal level.
especially at a federal level, that are number one, not even close to being verified for that job. They're not even close to even holding a candle to some of the other people that might have actually done a good job at that position, but they're telling us all this information for what? Are they telling us to do all of the wrong things so that we can rely on them more? Or are they trying to do they really think that they're giving us the right information? And this goes across the board, but specifically with like fitness, like specifically when you're talking about your own personal journey in fitness, whatever your goals are, whether it to be to lose weight, gain muscle, or just stay healthy in general and have more of a more fulfilling life when you get into your elderly years. But it's like we put a lot of stock in government to tell us what to do. But it's like for years, just little bits and pieces, we've just been lied to about little things, and we keep going, oh, okay, well, people make mistakes. What's that quote? Oh, fool me once, you know, shame on, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like we just keep getting fooled about this little stuff, but we don't take any accountability for that. And we're like, hey, we should probably stop listening to this goofball who's talking about public health, who is morbidly obese, doesn't look like they eat vegetables or do any type of exercise in their daily life. Why are we listening to them? And again, there's nothing personal against those people. They're probably great people, maybe. But
Debatable.
debatable. But it's like, why? Why do we just keep listening to the wrong people with the wrong set of information? Do we just think, oh well, our government, they put them in that position, they trust them, and it's like, first off, government and trust usually don't go in the same sentence when it comes to health. So, but the lack of accountability and the lack of um, and really the lack of you know overall acceptance of what your goals are, or overall acceptance of what you are supposed to be doing with your health, is just like at an all-time low. Everybody puts their 2 cents in, but they don't ever take extreme ownership of what they're actually doing. So from a perspective of like the little things that you see on, where you get your information for like medical journals and stuff, where do you get a lot of your sources from? What do you use as far as finding information? Is there anybody that you subscribe to heavily for that information, or what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it you can pull different research papers through. So like myself, my certification through ACSM
Mm-hmm.
or ACE or NASM, those will all push out a lot of good articles and research. There are guys that are sort of on the cutting edge of research in terms of like doing muscle biopsy and things like that. So guys, off the top of my head, like Brad Schoenfeld, it's like he's done 87 gajillion pieces of great research.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they'll specifically state like, hey, this is not very conclusive. There needs to be more research done on this thing, but here's what we found. And you can see how that reinforces what you're seeing in the real world. Dr. Andy Galpin is a great one. I know he did some recent podcasts with, I want to say it was Andrew Huberman.
He's been on Huberman's podcast a couple of times.
Yeah,
actually.
So he's good, and I know that he's done a lot of interviews with Barbell Shrugged. Those were some really good podcasts. So Andy Galpin's a great one. And then I also there's several YouTubers that I've been following for a while that sort of have their niches. So like if you're watching like Jeff Nippard, let's say, he's kind of a powerlifting, bodybuilding focused dude who likes to bring in some scientific components. He's a great guy to watch.
Yeah.
I love watching Clarence Kennedy's stuff. I don't know if you followed him on YouTube. He's a weightlifter.
Really. Yeah.
He's an interesting character because he's a guy who is at essentially like if he were to compete at the Olympics, he would get like a bronze medal. So he is pretty dang good weightlifter.
Yeah.
And he doesn't compete. He openly just says like, "Hey, I am on gear. I don't like it's basically he doesn't compete because of the politics of the sport and the anti-doping, because weightlifting is extremely corrupt and has a lot of issues. It's shocking. The IWF and the IOC, it's all super corrupt like crazy. That's a whole massive rabbit hole. But he doesn't compete, because of that. But he just makes a lot of YouTube content, and it's fascinating. Puts out great content, so he's a good one.
Do you listen to? And this is probably the one that most gym bros would be like, "Oh yeah." Do you listen to Jeff Cavalier at all?
So I watched some of his stuff initially. I think a lot of his stuff, like his basic bodybuilding stuff, and some like rehab and PT stuff, he puts out good stuff.
Functional movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I think he has. I think he's a good stepping stone, a good starting point.
Start there.
Good starting point of essentials. But a lot of his stuff, I mean, he's he probably makes a gajillion dollars. He's very like viral, very like base level stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of clickbaity, kind of, here's these tips to, shred down your six pack type stuff, which, we all, you got to game the algorithm sometimes.
Yeah.
So no disrespect to him. I think he's great if you're just like wanting out a good starting resource.
Yeah.
He's really good. And then outside of that, love Derek, more plays, more days. Like he's fascinating. I love going into his like pharmacology stuff.
Yeah.
Breaking down different athletics related things. He's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Tellender is another good one. I got some weightlifting coaching from him, and I know he's done stuff with Derek. He's done stuff with a lot of guys in that sphere. One other I would say, if you're more powerlifting focused athletics like jiu-jitsu, grappling, and weightlifting, Sika Strength on YouTube.
Okay.
They're a great one to watch.
Yeah.
They're like, I want to say they're like Scottish. They got the accents.
Yeah.
But they're some really, really good content coming out of them. But that's just a few off the top of my head.
I asked about Jeff Cavalier because that's probably the one person that most people see the most of on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like you, when I started really diving into like the science of exercise and that kind of stuff, I watched a lot of his content because his functional movements, and he's also a licensed physical therapist. So, and he's worked with multiple athletes and multiple celebrities.
A lot of sports teams.
A lot of sports teams and stuff. So like, that's my niche. Like that's what I like. But here more recently, I don't subscribe to him as much because of some of the content, the clickbaity stuff he's got. And he's obviously like super shredded. I don't think I've ever seen him wear a t-shirt. Like it's just one of those things where he's kind of like, he's got his niche.
And that's again, like I know personally with making my content, if I put out a story on Instagram, let's say, if I do the exact same exercise just with my shirt off, it'll get 50% more views.
Yes.
And it's like, if you're trying to build a business, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to, now, most of the time I got to keep my shirt on because I'm working out in a gym.
Yeah. That's
but
true.
if you're him, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're
exactly.
shredded. You might as well.
Yeah. But when you're marketing yourself, especially from a perspective of, either online coaching or trying to get your marketing out if you do in-person coaching, you really have to break down, like, obviously, like, your audience. And I'm a big proponent of, looks when it comes to this industry are about 75% of the battle. Like, if you look good and you have a persona, people are more likely to work with you. I know tons of guys who are a little bit out of shape, a little bit out of, they're not very, they don't have the aesthetics, but they're super smart when it comes to this stuff. And when it comes to teaching people how to do exercises and the way that they communicate to those people, it's just on a different level. So, very rarely do you have the two. Do you have somebody that looks good, that honestly lives their workouts and doesn't just tell you what to do, but also has the ability to, scale it back and kind of break it down for somebody who's new into bodybuilding or weightlifting. So that's always unique. Because when people come on the podcast and we talk about these things, it's like I kind of like to gain the perspective on who they're listening to, because when you have a situation where somebody's feeding you information, and obviously anything on a podcast can sound good, you have to make sure that all that information is obviously factual. And eventually, we have a TV here, so I want to throw some stuff on there eventually, but not on that level yet. I can't multitask like that. But
pull it up, Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie, pull it up. Yeah, I just think that your research is everything. Like, if you go onto any platform and you find some information that sounds extremely overwhelming or sounds a little fishy or just sounds like it's too good to be true, like, do your research. You can go on Google and you can go onto certain libraries for certain colleges, and you can actually find this stuff in medical journals, magazines, all this type of stuff. And you can do your own research. It's not that difficult if you're willing to put the time in and read it. So when you are looking at a body of work and you're trying to decide if, whether it be a video on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, it's like, if somebody is giving you information and they can't source it, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
There's got to be a source there. So that's one thing I've done in my personal life. If I go on Instagram and it's like, or go on TikTok and you have two different types of people telling you two different types of things, research it. Spend 30 minutes of your time, find out what it's all about, and then make a decision.
Yeah, you're right. Sourcing's huge. There's a guy, Jared Bidney, Bidne, I think, Explosive Strength Podcast.
Yeah.
He's really good. He's out of somewhere in Georgia, I believe.
Okay.
But not like a huge following or anything. I think it originally came out of like the West Side guys.
West Side Barbell?
Yeah. Which, again, like, that's a whole West Side's, crazy. Like, but a lot of the stuff is like, people, hate on it because equipped lifting or whatever, and they're all on gear. Like, sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really good stuff, in terms of methodology that came out of Louis Simmons and Ed Cohn and West Side.
Yeah.
And the reverse hyper, RIP.
Yeah.
And, the reverse hyper. Freaking fantastic. Basically solved my lower back issues.
Yeah.
It might not do the same for other people, but I think it's a fantastic piece of equipment.
Yeah.
But, sourcing is so important. So, like, that guy, pretty small following, but he churns out, like, high school and collegiate athletes who can jump, like, 40-inch verticals.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, if you, like, I have one of those Vertec jump mats, and the most I've jumped is, like, a 38 point something.
Yeah.
A 40-inch vertical is getting freaking up there.
That's up
like
there.
you're insane. And when I did that, like, I could dunk, and I'm not, like, I say I'm 5'10", I'm like 5'9.5", I could dunk being that height.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've got a vertical that's higher than that,
That's
you're like
good.
a 6 foot something athlete, like, you are a stud.
Yeah.
And so it's like, he doesn't have the following of Jeff Cavalier, but, I cross-reference it with other, resources that I've found over the years. I know that he knows what he's talking about. He's got the athletes to back it up. So that's another aspect. And sourcing, like you were saying, sourcing is so huge. And if you have something that you see that you're like, that's kind of counterintuitive, or that's a little different than what I've heard before, check out the other people that you've kind of learned are good resources. And if they're all saying something completely opposite, then, maybe that person was just like exaggerating, or maybe they're just a little off base on that particular thing.
Yeah.
So
And that comes to diet, supplementation, sleep.
everything,
That's
yeah.
everything. And it's like, if you can't source it and you can't actually put some type of actual like, you can't hold it at face value and see it for what it really is, like, don't do it. Like, just don't even waste your time. So yeah, you have to continue, and that's the, I think that's a beauty about the about exercising, about dieting, about being conscious of what you're doing to your body and how you're repairing it, how you're working out. Um, and like I said, taking extreme ownership of what you're doing is part of that extreme ownership, and having that responsibility is knowing exactly what you're doing to your body, where's the research, how does it play into the big picture of your goals, and how can we input that and sustain that throughout.
Yeah, and just constantly learning, constantly
Yeah,
updating. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. The I want to hit on one more thing. We're almost done here, but with exercising, with being in the gym as much as you are, and somebody that, and this question might get a little deep, but with somebody that you've dedicated a majority of your young adult life to actually working out and being somebody that really wants to test themselves, how often do you see it, or how often do you think that you have some type of, do you have something mentally that kind of, is there something, I'm trying to find a good way to ask this question, where when you have something like in the gym where you're doing that 6 days a week, and that's something you're dedicating your life to for your mental health, how often is it that is there any time where you just feel like your mental health is drained? Is there anything, and if so, how do you rejuvenate that mental health? And like, how do you, if you have any like mental if you have any mental discrepancies or whatnot, like, how do you fight that, like, as a person? Is there anything, and if you don't have any of those any type of mental blocks or anything, that's great, but I feel like most people do. But I kind of want to get some perspective on what you do to get past some of the mental obstacles that most people experience in their lives.
Yeah. So man, that's a deep one. I actually, I mean, going way back, like really, as I was sort of starting this journey, I was in a really rough spot. Um, I was really suicidal.
Mm,
My like first year of college.
wow.
Um, and just a total, total train wreck, directionless, no idea what I wanted to do. Um, and so I've gotten to a point that, um, even if really like difficult things happen to me, I don't really get like it sounds like, maybe I don't know if cocky's the word, or delusional, but yeah, I don't I don't really deal with those things anymore.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it is sort of a personal journey to maximize what I could do. Because it was for a long time, really. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was very directionless, felt purposeless. Um, some of it just had to do with my faith in God and returning to that, but a lot of it was also kind of realizing that as a man, I think we're told growing up that you are you're almost like defective. If you're a man, you're told that you need to open up, you need to be more emotional, get more in touch with your feminine side, you need to talk about your problems, you need to go to therapy. And I did all those things and they didn't help, because I think that's a a lot of ways that's just not how most guys deal with problems,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're told that's how we need to deal with them.
Yeah.
For me, it was like I just started training. I dialed in what I could in terms of what I could control. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, I figured like, all right, there's all this crap going on. What can I fix? So what can I at least start to improve?
Mm-hmm.
Just doing that over time more and more, and developing a sort of mental resilience, and to where I don't react nearly as emotionally to either good or bad things, like just kind of dialing things into where you have less big swings up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I don't have emotions. I mean, I can still, if something really sad happens, you can still cry or whatever. But you can sort of get to a point to where you don't get knocked off center over time. And that's just a journey. It's just a matter of, for me, I view it as kind of a back and forth to where over time you just get more and more centered, more and more grounded, to the point that even if terrible things happen, I could have, be in a car wreck on the way home, and I would, that car is my freaking baby. Like, I love my car so much, but hey, it wouldn't faze me. I'd be all right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you think that you attribute a lot of that improvement mentally to being in the gym, or do you think you attribute the not even just being in the gym, but I think just doing something that's difficult and having the mental fortitude, but also having the desire and the drive to continue to do it every day and have discipline over it. Like, I know that ultimately when you work out, it's good for mental health, short term. But then keeping that discipline over time is what makes it a therapy, not just a treatment, right? So, um, how much do you think you attributed that specifically to not just going to the gym, but also just doing hard things, challenging yourself, and ultimately failing? Is what I think the point I'm getting at is, do you think failing in the gym, or do you think failure in general trained your mind to not want to quit ever again?
I think it might be it. It might be a little odd to say, but I think it's winning.
Okay.
People like to frame it in terms of like you fail and fail and fail and you get knocked down and you keep getting back up, and that's totally true.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's more so like and we know the team that wins a sporting match, the fighter who wins the fight, his testosterone levels are increased significantly after that win.
Yeah.
The guy who lost, his testosterone levels drop significantly.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's like embracing the suck for so long and getting to the point that you're actually like, it's not like you keep getting knocked down. It's like you're winning. And, that may take longer for some people. You may not, there are people who are winning way more than me for sure. But for me, I think it's like I'm not the most jack guy in the world, but I look in the mirror and I'm like, dude, I weighed 130 freaking pounds when I graduated high school.
Yeah.
I was a string bean.
Yeah.
And, I'm decent 185 now or something. My squat when I started was 135 or whatever it was, and now, 500. And it's not even a matter of like I got beat up for so long. It was like I did. What am I going to do about that? Just keep winning. Just keep going harder. And you sort of develop, it's kind of the competence breeds confidence sort of thing.
Yeah.
So over time, as you build the competence and you get further along in your life, you carry yourself in such a different way. And the way that you view yourself, like when you look in the mirror, is completely different over time.
Yeah.
So I think that would be it for me. Is just like, and I know that sounds like cocky or douchey or whatever, but it's like, there's a reason.
Yeah. A lot of what you just said kind of reminded me of like your response to failure. And a lot of times someone's response to failure is discipline. And when that discipline leads to a victory, then at that point, or a win, that makes it the best response you could possibly have is, you know, you can lose, you can completely be knocked out of a race or completely get derailed from a goal, but the response of discipline in a manner that is, you know, beneficial to the person that is used to failing, when they receive a win for the first time in a long time, it makes all of the failures worth it. It makes all of the it makes all of the discipline that you may or may not have wanted to go through worth it. And that is again, hate using the word motivation, but that's something where you're not only somewhat motivated when you wake up, like where you want to get out of bed, but you are completely you're completely involved in something bigger than yourself. And again, I don't really have a theme for each podcast episode, but this this type of episode is really geared towards like taking ownership and taking what you have and the resources that you have at the moment, not what you're going to have, not what you used to have, what you have right now. How can we take those resources? How can we create a discipline? How can we treat our bodies as stewards? Control what we can't control. Don't control the rest. Don't try to do too much. And use that discipline to fail and fail and fail until that victory starts to manifest itself. Then I feel like at that point, then you become an upgraded level of yourself. Because I've said this before, life is not an upward incline. If somebody tells you that your life is just on an upward incline and it's just going, it's stairs, dude. Like it's stairs and you're an 85-year-old man. You're going to take it slow. You're going to go up quite a bit and then you're going to level off. You're going to go up again. And each stair is not the same. You're going to have, you know, you're going to have times where you're going to, you know, improve yourself and then times where you flatten out.
Or even you backslide.
Yeah. There's times where you'll even you'll trip backwards, whatever is going to knock you back. But those stairs are not going to be any less difficult. And more than likely, a lot of them are going to be, as you go up that ladder or go up those stairs, they're going to be more difficult as you get older. So if we can't take extreme ownership now, if we can't use the resources we have now, and count your weeks, make sure that we're always being cognizant of how much time you actually have. Like we might feel like we have a long time on this earth, but yesterday I was in high school. Tomorrow my kids would be in high school. And then the day after that, I'll be hanging out with my grandkids. Like it's one, and if I get that far, right? That's if something that's uncontrollable comes into my life and takes me out. Yeah. So if we as people can wake up and be conscious of that, not in a morbid sense, like, oh, time to wake up and can not be in control and maybe die. Yeah. Like that's not how it works. I think it's wake up, understand that you didn't wake yourself up and that something else did and a higher power woke you up, or there's a purpose that you are put on this earth for, and then take those resources, be a steward with them, and continue to walk in discipleship, discipline, and continue to strive for victory, fail a couple of times, but eventually reach that final goal of what you're trying to accomplish, and then make a new one. Don't just say, well, I reached it, we're good. No, there's never, if you're being stagnant in this life, if you are putting all of your eggs in the basket of this specific goal, then when that basket is deposited and you take that basket and you turn it in, you have no eggs. You have nothing to show for it except for a new goal to put more eggs in that basket. Yeah. So I think mentally on the basis of, what the gym does for me mentally is like when I wake up in the days that I look forward to going to the gym. I feel great. I feel like I can conquer the world. I feel like I'm in control of most of what's going on. Um, and I make it to the gym, I have a great workout. My day goes great. Well, that's good to a degree, but it's not always going to be like that. So on the days where I wake up and I don't look forward to going to the gym or doing something difficult or sitting in the sauna for 20 minutes or going into an ice bath, I don't want to look forward to it. That's when I look at myself and turn in the mirror and say, good, good. That is a good thing. Doing something that you don't want to do
Yeah.
and doing it habitually and making sure that you are doing it with a purpose, not just doing it because somebody told you to. Do what you want to do. Like, go and do whatever you set your heart to. Nobody can stop you if that's the goal you're looking to attain. But without any type of discipline or any type of suck to embrace,
Yeah.
you just kind of hang out. You're just kind of here. And I'm not in the business of, or not even business. I have no interest in just being here. I have an interest in doing things that are way outside of my comfort zone and way harder than I could have imagined. And that's where, but to get there, you have to continue to do these little bits and pieces of just hard activities that just make life
Yeah.
easier in the long run. So, well, do you have anything you want to share? I know that as a platform like this, shared to YouTube and whatnot, and I like to take the last minute or two, have my guests share something that maybe is on their mind, whatever they're going through personally, or something there's a victory there, and that they can pass on to other people. I think again, being a steward, sometimes when you have positive things in your life, a lot of human interaction should be, passing along gifts, not keeping them for yourself, and passing along experiences because that's going to propel a lot of people forward in ways that they never saw before. So, is there anything that you want to share that's on your mind at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what I would like to instill in a lot of people, it's, my focus generally is towards men, younger men especially. And so I think for that, it's a lot of guys these days, I feel like, don't get hardly any positive reinforcement from, maybe from their parents,
Mm-hmm.
but that's for a lot of people, that's it. And a lot of guys might not even get that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for guys these days to kind of realize you can, you can achieve probably a lot more than you think you could. Guys aspire to these high things, but I think a lot of times in the back of their mind, they're like, I don't really could I ever actually get there?
Yeah.
And I've started to realize for myself that you actually can. And that doesn't mean that I'm complacent where I'm at. It's I want to squat 600 pounds now. I want to get a faster Porsche, I want to do all these things, so you can't like you were talking about with goals. It's you can't allow yourself to stagnate. It's
Mm-hmm.
you gotta, a lot of it, why I do it is seeing guys they've been failing. They hit that 135 bench, and you see the bug bite them.
Yeah.
You're like, yes, there
Yeah.
it is.
They're
Keep
getting
going now, and now they want to hit 185, and then they want to hit 225, and they want to keep going, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And even outside of the gym, but that's where my focus is strength and fitness related goals. But no matter what that is, you can't get complacent. You just got to keep going, keep pushing. Because if you keep that and you have developed that discipline to stay centered and keep going, you can go a lot further than you think you could.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would be the one thing, if I could instill that, it's just keep trusting the process, keep going. Cause
Mm-hmm.
you actually can get there if you do it.
Yeah. I when I share bits and pieces of information like that, it sounds like a broken record because I kind of that's something that I try to instill into my thinking on a daily basis. Like, but ultimately, you brought up a point at the beginning talking about, parents and some type of outside force that's giving you encouragement and telling you can do it and continuing to instill into, whether it be the younger generation or even people our age or even older people, you can instill encouragement into anybody. Doesn't
It's
matter
huge.
if you're older than them, younger than them, if you're more qualified than them. That stuff doesn't matter. It's when you are giving some type of encouragement to somebody or giving them a shoulder to cry on, whatever it is. The power of togetherness and connectiveness it can't beat that. It's like
Oh yeah, the encouragement's huge. That's
you
why I
can't beat
love that gym environments, because like if I see it, if I see a kid hit like if I know that he just hit that 95-pound bench and that's his PR,
that.
and
Yeah.
he's excited and I know it, I'm gonna go over and dap him up, like this kid that I don't even freaking know. I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, that's freaking awesome.
That's
Let's go,
awesome.
bro.
Yeah.
Just because I know, like, in his mind, he's like, oh, the guy who throws the freaky weight over his head just came over and gave me props. It's like
Yeah.
he's gonna be excited about that. And so like if it's like an extra like 5 seconds of effort for me to go give him props and try to just push him a little further and get him a little more hooked into it,
Yeah.
why wouldn't I do that? And that
If
encouragement's huge. My parents, they pushed me, they helped encourage me for so long, and that was huge.
yeah. If you ask any athlete nowadays what got them into a sport or got them into what they do for a living, they're usually going to tell you one of three things. The first one they're going to tell you is, well, I did this because I wanted to prove to the people around me that I could do it, um, and give them hope that somebody that's in their inner circle can accomplish something. So that's the first one. Second one is, hey, my family, we grew up poor, we had nothing, and I'm doing this for them to be able to advance or level up in life and give them purpose, give them um give them, a bed to sleep on a roof over their head and a lifestyle that they never saw themselves having before. And then the third thing is you ask them, a lot of these athletes be like, "Hey, why did you get into this type of work?" And they'll say, "Cuz I saw that guy or that girl or I saw that person or whoever they they put their faith into, they saw them accomplish." And although they may have not gotten any type of verbal feedback on that from that person, but every single one of them is going to say, I saw them go out and accomplish, and I can do the same thing too." And then now it's up to the people around them to give them the encouragement to be like that. So that's such a big piece of gym space, all that stuff. People get scared about it, they get overwhelmed, which is understandable. But that is the camaraderie that comes along with big gyms like that. And I think, again, big reason why I have this podcast is for perspective. You might have a gym full of people, and there's doing all different types of goals and exercises, and some part of my brain tells me I want to gain perspective on every single person in that gym. I want to see what they're doing and how it's helping them and better themselves. And then obviously recording it, putting it out there for the world to see, and it's going to touch somebody, right? I have days where I feel completely off and the podcast doesn't flow really well, or I feel like I'm stumbling over my words, but I know in that episode, there's a nugget that can be passed along to somebody else, and then they can adopt that type of practice, and they can have that and spread it throughout their community too. And we're not the only people doing this. There's thousands of other podcasts that are in the same category that do this. So it's a blessing. It's really nice to have a platform like this and live in a country like the U.S. where we can sit down and do this and feel like we're free and open to conversation and do whatever we like. So with all the screwed up crap that goes on, and even some of the stuff that goes on really close to home here in Tennessee, it's like just don't listen to it. The only thing that matters is what you are doing to better the people around you and yourself.
Yeah,
That's
makes it
all
worth it.
that matters. And if you think for a second that your opinion is just going to automatically change someone else's perspective, you're wrong. It's not just going to automatically change them. It's not going to you're not going to say 5 words and they'll be like, oh, yeah. There has to be some work involved.
Yeah,
So
you got to set the example.
You have to be the example for others, and you have to have a platform that speaks love and truth and motivates everybody to be either a better person or less of a loser. And you have to put that into perspective so that those around you can live by your example, and you pass it along. It's not rocket science, but for some reason, it's the hardest science for people to master. It is the hardest thing for people to take information from others, prove that, oh, I was wrong. Here's the evidence. Here's the data. Okay, I can get along with this person, and we can have camaraderie, and we can work towards a goal together. Yep. That's one of the hardest things that people can't fathom. But again, breaking down those barriers, that's a big reason why I do this podcast. Never met you before, seen you in the gym before, but I was like, I need to reach out to him and see what perspective he has to offer, because it helps me way more than I think it helps somebody on any type of platform. But that, that's selfish. But outside of that, I think it's got more to do with the audience that we're speaking to. So I do appreciate it. I think it's really cool to just have people that you never met before. We have mutual friends, but it's cool to have somebody on the podcast that you may or may not have had any type of general information about. And then they come on the podcast and they share all different types of awesome stories and life lessons and all different types of data that can help people around the world. So where can people find you on social media? I'll put it all in the description, obviously, but I'll put everything in there. For those of you that don't know, Josh is a personal trainer. Is that your only line of work? Do you do other things on the side?
Yeah, no, that's it. It's full time.
That's it. Okay. So if you guys want more information on his training methods, or you want some more information on his different types of training packages, if you want to work with Josh, I'll put that all in the description. You can reach out to him. Heck of a guy, really nice to get to meet. Obviously we go to the same gym together, so I have taken a ton of tips just from what he's told me today. So I'll even put those into my practices. So, awesome. Well, if that's it for you, then we will say peace out. Unless you have one more thing you want to mention, what's your platforms like?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm probably about to start up doing YouTube.
Okay.
So we'll see on that. But for right now, mostly on Instagram and TikTok. It's same username on both. It's Coach Coop.
Coach
Fitness.
Coop.
Coach
Okay.
COOP Fitness. On both of those. So yeah.
Very nice. All right, guys. Well, y'all be safe out there. Love every one of you. Glad to have this opportunity, and we'll say peace out.
Thank you, dude.